From the Wando docks to her first few months in office, I speak exclusively with Mount Pleasant Town Councilwoman Kathy Landing for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores.
Kathy Landing.
Quintin, Washington.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm actually great.
Doing good.
I was just going to ask you, you've been on council for a couple of months now, here at Mount Pleasant Town Council. What is it like to be Councilman Kathy Landing right now?
Well, let's see, it's 8 months, hard to believe. Well, technically we were actually sworn in November, so maybe we're in 9 months now. What it's like is a real joy. People have asked me, is it totally different than you thought? Is it whatever? And I actually believe that it was all very much meant to be, and that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. And hopefully I'll make as few mistakes as possible, although, you know, being a rookie, you do make them sometimes. But so far I've just loved hearing from people and having them ask questions and being able to, if I don't know the answer, get the answer for them. And so yes, it's been great.
Well, that's so good to hear. Let me take you down the street to Shem Creek.
Okay.
There's some developing news right now, as you probably know, Wando Docks. Sunday Whitney, that is, of Mount Military News, wrote this quote: Brett Elrod of Mount Pleasant has signed a contract with the owners of the Wando Seafood Arc on Shem Creek to purchase it and refurbish it for the benefit of the community. He's currently in the 90-day due diligence process, conducting environmental assessments. Elrod intends to work with the community, to include the town of Mount Pleasant, Save Shem Creek, and other interested parties to develop a long-term plan for the property that can help Shem Creek fleet thrive, which is providing local seafood to the Charleston area, he says. How should that long-term plan look like in your mind?
Well, first of all, I'm not an expert on what that long-term plan should look like. What I do know is that one of the main issues we've had come before us already involved the crab bank renourishment project, and how that might affect Shem Creek. And big concerns about Shem Creek are as follows. One, it tends to silt up every few years, and we have to have it deepened again, which is a big expense. So we want to make sure that one, we don't do something to save one project and then hurt another. So that's something that council voted on, to actually do a separate study, so that we could make sure that if we do renourish crab bank with the sand and silt that comes from the deepening of the harbor to the 52 feet, that we will not create another problem along the way. So first of all, there's that. As far as what the long-range plan for the docks, otherwise I can't say I can give you a whole lot of detail.
Sure.
But it is absolutely critical that we protect and do everything we can for our shrimpers and for our seafood market in general, because this is such a historic and extremely important economic side of our community. Okay,
and let me turn you over to transportation. Live by News reports this quote: the town of Mount Pleasant and the Berkeley, Charleston, Dorchester County Council of Governments, that is, BCDC-OG, are partnering for a town-wide transit study. Some of the staff members met with the people at the Senior Center on Tuesday morning to talk about a new online survey. Why now?
This is an excellent subject. In fact, I actually posted on both Facebook and Nextdoor and put the study itself several weeks ago. And the issue now is that there has been a lot of concern, and it was even heightened during the bridge break.
Oh yeah.
When we already knew we had lots of traffic issues, and then all of a sudden it came to a head when we only had one way to get out of town. That we need more mass transit, and it's an issue that affects so many aspects of our life. Not only does it have a lot to do with traffic congestion in Mount Pleasant, where if we could increase the bus service and have it be much more reliable and much more targeted to the things we need here, such as hospitality workers who have to commute from other parts of the Charleston County area or Dorchester or Berkeley County, as well as the issue of the fact that, frankly, housing is so expensive here. And so we have those aspects. But we need to have a lot more done in Mount Pleasant, but we also need awareness to be a lot higher. And right now what we often hear is gee, the bus service isn't reliable because they change the routes or it's late a lot and things like that, and therefore people can't rely on it. We need to have routes that are reliable. We need to have, we need to look at other aspects such as increased ferry service. As a matter of fact, I just had a meeting this morning. I was one of the people that met with Sharon Hollis so that we could, who is the transit authority person who gave us all the details on why they're doing it now. And so I think the important thing is they recognize that Mount Pleasant needs more service, and we've been asking for it, we've been crying out for it. So hopefully this study, and I do encourage everyone to please participate if possible, even if they're not likely to ride the bus, they may still have some great contributions to make to that survey. So please take the time.
North of the Isle of Palms Connector. You said this recently on your Facebook page, quote, "Hello Mount Pleasant, thank you so much to everyone who responded to my questions about bringing needed businesses and services to our community, especially in the area north of the IOP connector. We are working on several different exciting projects and will keep you posted and continue to ask for input." As we sit here right now, Kathy, what are those much needed services and business north of the Isle of Palms connector?
When I put that survey, it wasn't a survey with all different questions, it was just to ask people, what would you like to see in this end of town that we don't already have or that we don't have enough of? I received a lot of feedback, and it was tremendous because it was all open-ended. So people were really able to just put whatever they wanted on there. And what I saw over and over again were things like a lot of folks definitely would like to see more varied restaurants. Right now we have some restaurants, but we don't have any fine dining to speak of, but we also don't have enough family restaurants, according to a lot of folks. And obviously we have a lot of families, including a lot of young families. Another thing we saw was some of the things that have more to do with parks and recreation, like people wanting dog parks and more, even more bike lanes and even more bike paths and trails through some of the parks, which some of which is being worked on and some of which has seemingly been stalled. We also had things like, gee, we'd like to have a theater on this end of town. We don't have a cinema, movie theater. So where there's two south of the connector, at least two.
Yeah,
right, and then the one right over here. So, but someone mentioned an IMAX. I don't know about that, but that was interesting. I heard everything as varied as things like an ice skating rink. Just recently I attended the groundbreaking for a child care center, Kids Are Kids, which is going to be opening on Bessemer Road later in the year or early in the new year. And this is something that's desperately needed because we have so many young families and long waiting lists for child care services. So what I was thrilled and pleased to see is that people were very creative. That's just a small list of the things. But I am hoping to take that information and already have been working on some very focused ideas. One of the ideas, which you know, the more we have put together, the more I'll be able to reveal, but at this time is the concept of actually reproducing what's known as the Charleston Digital Corridor, which right now is in what they call the NOMO area, or up Rutledge Avenue, Pacific Box and Crate, which includes a campus that's very, very high energy and exciting and has at least 3 great anchor tenants, all in the tech area, all very popular with millennials. I hear a lot of folks saying we'd love to think that our students, when they graduate from college or high school, whether they go on to vocational school, Trident Tech, whether they use the Wando Advanced Studies program, that they can get into a job that's available in Mount Pleasant. And right now people feel like they have to go downtown or to Boeing in North Charleston or Bosch or some of these other places. It would be very exciting, and so that's actually something we're working on. Is to possibly reproduce that campus and exciting tech-oriented field. And there's many other things. So we hear you, and I'd really love to continue to hear more input from the public.
Oh, let me go back to a classic Quintin's close-ups. Describe to me the following in one word. The National Medal of Honor Museum, in one word.
Important.
The Snee Farm Drainage Improvement Project.
Essential.
The Midnight Massacre, or better known as the old Channel 4 building on Ben Sawyer Boulevard.
If you're saying the Midnight Massacre, I'm going to say confusing.
Why is that confusing to you?
It's not confusing to me. It was confusing to a lot of folks. Yeah, I feel from going back and reading the minutes, I was only there for the early part of that meeting
Right.
since I wasn't on council
Right.
at the time. I did leave before it got into the much more heated part of the evening. I did see some of that, and but it is confusing because there's been a lot of effort both then and since made to try to decipher what happened and whether it should have happened that way. A lot of folks are convinced it shouldn't have happened that way, for good reason. I think what I would say is there's a lot of effort, including a legal opinion that has been sought, that we voted to seek. So I probably can't say too much.
Right.
But what I will say is, to me, I think that one of the most important things, and I found this to be a hallmark so far of both what I've tried to do and what the public seems to be reacting very positively to that I've done, is communication. And I think the impression that a lot of people came away with from that night was that, regardless of what the legal opinion ends up being, was that the spirit of being really transparent and what we call FOIA, Freedom of Information
Right.
Act, keeping that as front and center and making sure the public knows what's going on, knows what decisions are going to be voted on, knows when it's going to happen, that maybe that the spirit of that was missed by keeping it to such a late night, what they call the midnight massacre. So regardless of how the legal opinion comes on, I hope we all go away learning a lot from that experience and making sure that it does not happen again.
And I know that you have been on council since November, but as we sit here right now, what are those goals in your mind for Mount Pleasant Town Council, particularly the area that you are representing?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Quentin, because one of the committees I serve on of the 5 is economic development. And I'm delighted to be on this committee because bringing businesses and services to the folks of Mount Pleasant, as we talked about earlier with my Facebook post, is really a goal of mine in a big way, because I believe that it accomplishes so many things. And the first thing that it can accomplish is that if you bring much needed services and businesses, especially to areas of town where they don't exist now, like north of the IOP connector, you actually can decrease some of the traffic flow that comes down to the more congested part of town where, Johnny Dodds, Coleman Boulevard, et cetera, because right now that's where a lot of that is, or even downtown Charleston. And so that's one of the reasons, so to actually help alleviate some of the car trips or shorten car trips. Another one is just simply because if you can bring great businesses that people want to have nearby, let's face it, you bring some terrific revenue to our town, and that terrific revenue can help pay for all the infrastructure and maintenance and other issues we have as an ongoing basis without having to raise our property taxes or other fees, which is one of my goals as well, is to not have to raise any of those. I also serve on the Finance Committee, so that dovetails with that. And so one of the things I observed pretty quickly, even when I was attending meetings as a candidate, and even before I started running for office, was I noticed that oftentimes there's a reactive way of dealing with requests from developers. And in this case, I'm going to talk specifically about commercial real estate, but really it could be residential too, is that if we as council members kind of sit back and wait until someone comes and asks for a zoning request or an annexation or some sort of a permit, that we are having to give a yes or no answer on that particular question, perhaps spending a lot of time sometimes. But if we could go out and before someone comes to us and say, hey, here's a piece of property, we know that this part of town has been really asking for this type of business, here's a business that might be willing to come, would you be willing to develop this, would you be willing to, and it may sound like a crazy idea, but I've already started doing this, and what I'm finding is that people are responding very, very positively. So by meeting with business owners in town who are already very successful and speaking with them and listening to them and marrying that up with what I'm hearing from our citizens and residents, I'm finding that, one, it's a little bit surprising to them. They don't expect to have a town council member come ask those questions, but two, they're responding as in, hey, maybe we can collaborate and maybe we can get some things going that will really make a difference for the town. So I'd say my biggest goal on that side is to perhaps solve many smaller problems and even a few of the bigger ones by being more proactive on economic development specific to commercial businesses.
Okay. Councilwoman Kathy Landing, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Anytime.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.